All right. Action. We are live. All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Acquire and Operate, aka For the Love of the Game. Sitting here with my man Kjael, and we missed on recording this session a few weeks back on the topic of buyer journey mapping, but it's so impactful and useful. I guess you just go on, insert adjective here. We wanted to make sure that we did a shot on it. So today we're going to go back a little bit, 2 episodes, but we're going to be rocking on mapping the buyer journey to inform content gaps. And that's one of about 1,000 use cases. So if you wouldn't mind scrolling down, Kev. So we will jump into this. The cool part is that we actually stood up a turnkey, ready to rock Figma template. And we'll kind of navigate through that. But the big use cases, buyer journey mapping has become very prominent in SaaS because it's basically the only thing that matters. And if you're clear on the buyer journey map and you kind of orient yourself accordingly, it can inform all kinds of activities and all kinds of tactics. So the hope today is to take you through some of the frameworks that we like just to kind of zoom out. Remember, we're all just trying to accumulate the best frameworks over time. When we build our own, we do our best to share them out, but we'll start with kind of the OG takes on buyer frameworks, how that stuff has evolved. And then we'll jump into a buyer journey template that you can actually make use of today. But where do we start? We're going to start with winning by design.
Yeah, we can start with winning by design's template.
Or what's the original buyer journey, Kjael? I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with schmunnel.
Funnel.
Right?
A marketing funnel.
A marketing funnel, right? When it starts at the top, there's probably something like leads, and then it goes into qualified leads, opportunities. And what's the problem with that? Or what has been the huge criticism and basically a sweeping movement away from that?
Yeah, so overall, the industry thinks in terms of funnels: top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. We've all heard the tofu, mofu, bofu kind of conversation. The challenge there is you're essentially just looking at a few breakpoints of conversion between those stages. You're not actually getting down into the weeds and understanding what is actually driving the buying intent of this person, and what else can we do to make sure not only do we convert them as a customer, but make them happy enough to the point where they go and become an evangelist to share our product and services with other people.
Totally. So I guess said another way, OG funnels ended at the point of purchase, and they were almost totally in the context of sales-led growth. And they didn't really contemplate implementation or activation. Implementation is more for sales-led growth, where you have humans getting folks stood up in the software. Activation, do we have folks in the product on a daily? We've built habit loops. They need this on it's core to their existence on this team at this company. And then ideally the true outcome that we're after is, as you said, evangelist, right? We want to create a word of mouth flywheel by creating super delighted customers. And that stuff doesn't really happen until well after the point of sale. So instead of the funnel, it's now more often referred to as the bow tie, which we've spoken a lot about. And winning by design, this dude Jocko, if I can, I will shamelessly plug Jocko because I think he's Flemish. Have you ever watched any of his YouTubes?
No, I haven't seen his YouTube. I've watched the main CEO.
So he might like this shit more than we do, man. He gets so pumped. He's just like, yes. He's like, and then you get to using impacting, yes. And he's just so pumped. It's, if nothing else, it'll put wind in your sails. But simply put, and we can just kind of jam through this. We got. So I guess the thing here is that it's not so much a funnel, right? It moves left to traditional funnels move top to bottom. They end at the point of sale. There's a lot of flaws in that thought process. This is on a linear axis. Yeah.
And I would like to make one comment. Today, the reason why I wanted to start with defining what a buyer journey is because today, a lot of folks confuse a funnel with a buyer journey.
Totally.
So a lot of folks will say, okay, what is even if you go to HubSpot.com, HubSpot also confuses a buyer journey with a funnel. HubSpot has a long blog on how to build a buyer journey for your sales process. That is wrong. The reason why that advice is wrong is because you're going back to the funnel methodology and you're only thinking about what the sales team is doing in that silo to get the person to the purchase. Again, what we're trying to drive is evangelism. So to Kjael's point, a funnel stops at the purchase. A funnel is very let's say, macro focused. But once you get into the buyer journey, now you're getting into the micro focus of it all, where you can get down to the weeds like we talked about to drive that evangelism.
Totally. So for the listeners, I'll just describe it quick. So it starts on the left. It's basically like two funnels stuck together with the middle. So for those that had too much fun in college, you take the top off a beer bong and you attach it to another one. And that's what you're looking at. It's almost like two plungers kind of facing away from each other. And on the left side, we've got awareness, and then it moves left to right. And again, Kev's going to jump in on this because you don't want to take these stages at face value. That's like the first part of direction, is you want to consider in your context, what is the buyer journey? But I would say like the conventional standard is it starts with awareness. And that's usually like the buyer realizes they have a problem, or the prospect realizes they have a problem. Like, hey, something's going up. Then they move into education. I wonder what's out there that can solve my thing. Then they move into selection. Cool. There's 2 or 3 vendors that are kind of interesting. At selection, that's typically in a sales-led environment. That's where a sales process would kick off. So now you're doing demos, you're executing discovery, you're pitching proposals, et cetera. Then the very middle of where the knot would be in a bow tie is the point of sale. So they transact, they become a customer. Now we move into onboarding, and then we move into impact or activation. And the naming conventions vary a lot, but thematically, this is a good description. So we move onboarding into using, impacting, and then into growing. Whereas, your customers love you so much, they're screaming from the mountaintops. And then we'll get into this, but in a kind of a conventional standard too, if you're thinking about record keeping in your CRM, the stages are going to be, or actually if you scroll back up for me real quick. So if we go that one right there, down a little bit. So you got prospect, lead, whatever, and then it moves into MQL, marketing qualified lead, which usually means they're engaging with white papers, they attended a webinar, you're starting to, I guess, consider engagement at this stage. And then it moves into a sales qualified lead. This is typically when discovery is executed. They have a criteria, BANT, maybe budget, authority, need, timing, medic, there's a whole bunch of them. And then they move into a commit. Now that's a commit. That's funny because that's mostly like you put that a little bit before. I mean, commit is like like a forecasting exercise for the most part, but commit, okay. And then it would be like customer, cool. And then we move to live, and then we move to MRR. So now we're seeing customer lifetime contemplated, right? So MRR meaning that they pivoted, they've renewed. If it's a monthly situation, they've removed for the first couple of months, and you're like, cool, we've stuck revenue for the business. And then you move into the ultimate metric, which all of us are here for, is lifetime value. Cool.
Yep.
So that's the skinny on the bow tie. Yeah.
That's the skinny on the bow tie. Said another way, and again, take this with a grain of salt. There's a standard of 3 stages when considering top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel, right? So there's the awareness stage, then there's the consideration, and then there's decision. So what we just talked through, that's the first half of this bow tie, right? This can be, let's say, customized and tailored to your actual buyer journey for your customer. So if you have 5 stages, 6 stages, ideally, the conversation that Kjael and I just went through, prospect to lead to MQL to SQL, you may have SAL in there, like from an MQL to a sales accepted lead, because there might be a BDR doing a handoff to an account executive, and we both need to agree this is something we're going to accept into our pipelines. So take this model with a grain of salt. There are more stages that can go in between, but ideally we're just covering the awareness, consideration, and decision stages here to identify where are the break points where we need to push people forward. And then on the other half is where you drive that evangelism like we talked about.
Totally. And even just having this mapped, and right, the holy grail is to have the machine that is the business fully mapped. And honestly, the bow tie is probably your best bet to encapsulate everything operationally. Like it's not going to, that touches revenue anyway. And you can think about personnel here. You can think about incentives. As a sales leader, you can look at this very holistically and diagnose issues, right? Where it's as simple as like, and the funnel should, in terms of volume or number of opportunities in each stage, it should look like this, where you have a ton of prospects, fewer MQLs, even fewer SQLs, all the way down to the fewest, which would be committed customers, right?
And go ahead.
Well, just to close a little bit, I guess like framing questions for you to help you understand your context are usually, I would start with, and there's some really good content on this. Winning by design is off the charts. This book I can't get enough of is, and I suck at saying the name. They might, the irony is they're like a CMO agency, but it's the name. I'm like Terminator 3D2. It's T2D3. And so some decision points are like, what's the typical transaction value? What's your average customer value, right? ACV. And it's like the lower it is, the more likely that it's a product-led growth motion. So there isn't a human-led sales process. There isn't human-led implementation, et cetera. So you might think about, are we doing a few high-value transactions where it's a highly involved, highly consultative sales process and nuanced, sophisticated implementation? If so, you probably want to follow more like the sales-led kind of conventions. If it's, and so we're doing, 200 deals a year at 50K average contract value. Okay, you probably want to look at it through that lens. If you're doing 100 or whatever, add a zero to every situation. So it's like, hey, we're doing 2,000 customers a year, and that lifetime value is $1,000. Then you're probably taking a more product-led growth thing, which just means that this is more user-driven, more self-serve, and there's fewer interventions. So like one thing that would there's no contemplating a sales accepted lead, right? You're just using objective data to define that. You're not having handoffs between SDRs. You don't even have an SDR function. You probably don't have account executives. But anyway, and from here, and I know there's some saucy stuff to the right. That's more just like added there for thinking. Maybe we can bump down, because now it's like, okay, cool. So let me just for us, if you're putting this into action, anybody, if you wouldn't mind zooming out just a little bit. So to the right, I basically just pasted a bunch of what I think are interesting. So you've got this one here now is if you zoom in on the one with the second row. So yeah, that guy. So now it's like, all right, now we take that kind of blueprint and we start to think about how we foot that to activities that generate stuff, right? So here, unidentified is synonymous with prospect. They've lit up LinkedIn ads, Google ads, organic, outbound, and then they're starting to consider what that buyer journey looks like as a function of where the buyer is in their journey and which prompts or activities they're using to kind of nurture the user along. And if you scroll to the left a little bit, we've got
I'm sorry, to the left.
Yeah, all the way to the left. The next iteration. We can touch on this one. This one's kind of cool. This one's a little random, but I can't remember who put this together. It might have been Lenny. But anyway, the race car growth for these are just kind of some spice, some seasoning. So some of these frameworks are just stuff to kind of consider. They don't necessarily translate directly to the buyer journey map, which our framework is the bow tie. But cool stuff like growth engine, kickstarts, fuel,
this one gave me a
lubricant.
headache. This one's for more enterprise organization for sure.
100%. He's enterprise SaaS to the bone. But if you go, so if we zoom out and go to the second flavor of that winning by design, yeah. Okay, so now let's zoom in. So it's like, all right, cool. So for the watchers, you'll notice same stages, right? Awareness, education, selection, et cetera. But again, just like the model or the example we looked at, now we're looking at actual user activities and flows through it, right? So you've got inbound content, meetings, handoffs, there's discovery, demo, and you can see the whole sales process, right? In between SQL and commit, which is a handoff from the SDR, they've qualified the opportunity, diagnose, AKA discovery, typically BANT, medic, whatever. Then they prescribe, here's our recommendation. Then they get them into a demo, and then they, negotiate trade, close, commit. And then you move into pre-board, and then you move into adoption, you move into expansion. So I would say this is kind of the gold standard of like a base case for a sales-led organization. But you can see once you have the bow tie laid out, you think about the stages in your context for your buyer journey, you can start to map some really, really interesting stuff here. And then if you scroll down below to the third one, and this was kind of the use case that I thought would be the easiest for everyone to start with, is you start to think about mapping your content. So a very useful exercise is to firstly lay out the buyer journey, lay out the bow tie, and our template, which we'll wrap with, has some good prompts for like the questions that your users are probably asking at each stage, which you can then use to directly inform content. But we've got on the awareness side, industry reports, infographics, YouTube videos, case studies. On the education side, we've got newsletters, case studies again, demos, how-to videos. As you get into selection, this is going to be like competitor comparisons, customer testimonials, et cetera. So that's just good inspo. This one, I wouldn't I would start with what you got. get it laid out visually, and then the gap should be pretty glaring. And it's like, oh shit, we don't have much in the selection side. We should put together ROI calculators, or we need to giddy up on some testimonials from our customers, et cetera. And then ideally, as you beef up content and prompts, nudges, however you want to think about it, in each stage of the buyer journey, you should start to see either the volume in those stages increase or the conversion rates, or ideally, obviously both.
Ideally both.
Right.
Yeah. So in summary, I was going to say, as you're considering establishing a buyer journey, or you're considering identifying the gaps in your current buyer journey and how you can properly optimize it, starting with the bow tie framework from Winning by Design, this is a great way to start thinking about it. And then, similar to the additional models here that we've provided, this is a great way to start to map out like the flow of how you expect every step to go, right? And this is all still the ideation process. Now, to get everyone bought in, you're going to share this ideation process. But how you light it up, you need to apply owners to each one of these stages. And then you need to apply what kind of KPIs do we want to look for to make sure what we're doing in that part of the buyer journey is actually working. And you also want to make sure, most importantly, your system of record is tracking all this stuff. If it's not in Salesforce, if it's not in HubSpot, you're essentially wasting your time. Start with tracking your data and then making sense of it all. And as a nice segue, we have this nice framework here that you can use to start to put that together. So in each one of the stages we just touched on, ideally, you're going to start with row one and kind of put yourself in the shoes of that prospect and start to understand, what questions would they be asking by stage? So if we're in the awareness stage, what is the problem I'm dealing with today? Where am I going to go to try to find the answer about it? You know what I'm saying? It's like,
totally.
After you put those, go ahead.
And actually, yeah, if you don't mind, perhaps let's zoom out and just kind of give a quick orientation to the framework first, and then we can dive in, but just to set the whole context, because just to kind of tie the whole concept together, right? So here we ditch the bow tie, but it's there in principle, right? It's just not visually represented, but we've got our stages, and in our context right now is PLG, right? For our portfolio. So the kind of columns or the rows should be generally familiar at this point, right? We're progressing folks towards a point of sale, and then we're progressing folks towards a promoter, evangelist, whatever you want to call it. So we've got awareness, consideration, selection, onboarded, impact, promoter. And then we've broken this up in terms of the column, because it's like, okay, in this context then, what do I want to visualize as a function of the buyer journey? So we kept it kind of simple here. We've got user insights up top, and this is obviously, you want to start with empathy. And one comment too, sorry, this just came back to me, is a very good exercise once you have this generally laid out, is to think about your 4 or 5 best customers situations. Like who converted.
Always start with your best customers.
Yeah, like who converted the fastest, who has the best contract value, who's been the easiest to support, which customers have the best retention, and then ideally you can reverse engineer their buyer journey, and then you start there. So just reverse engineer what's been the most productive for you. And even that exercise just to define is amazing, but you probably want to start there, reverse engineer the thing, and then try to get everybody walking that road, so to speak. So sorry, quick caveat, back to the template here, which is meant to be actionable as shit. And the beautiful thing, as you're probably noting, is that in Figma Jam, you can zoom way in and way out. So you should be able to achieve a crazy level of detail within these things, and you can beef it up and make it your own. But if you zoom back out for me, we've got user insights at the tippity top. You want to start with empathy always when it comes to buyer journeys. Then tactics and channels. This is where you might start to think about the prompts and the flows that we had just looked at. And then you get into content. And then we get into the brass tacks, and I'll pass the mic to you. So now we get into like data and systems that introduce visibility into this system. And obviously, and that gives you huge leverage when you find breakpoints, areas to improve, et cetera. But what are we looking at on the technical side?
Yeah, so on the technical side, at the very least, let's say for the entire buyer journey, you need your system of record. CRM, Salesforce, or HubSpot at the very least. And as you start with that, let's say if you have email campaigns going out, ad campaigns going out, at the very least, top of the funnel, you'll be able to see how those campaigns are working. If someone raises their hand, or let's say subscribes to get more information, now you can track that person as they come into the CRM. And then from there, you have the life cycle stages just getting attributed at every stage. So we say, cool, we know this person's a prospect. There should be some type of streamlined workflows that says, okay, we've identified this prospect. Let's see what pages they've touched. Now let's reach out to them with maybe some marketing automation emails to push them to the next stage. That's ideally the way it should work.
Totally. So we've got life cycle stage, which is like the absolute starting point, which is like we have a prospect identifying where they are in the journey. Full stop, right? And usually once they're a prospect, you need like that usually means you have their information. So a prospect, so there's a difference between like TAM, or we always used to call it eyes on TAM, because TAM is meaningless unless you can action it. So eyes on TAM means you at least have a name and an email address. And ideally you have a link, you have a LinkedIn profile or something that you've been able to enrich so that you can grab their job title, the firm they work for, et cetera. And then you can start to enrich firmographics, technographics, and other stuff to then try to get more data driven on if it fits your ideal customer profile, your ICP. Then we've got tech stack, and it's so funny because like the space in this is so skinny for tech stack, but ideally you're just like, and you can keep it simple. And the stuff that you've done, Kev, with like a full blown data model is so gnarly and off the charts, right? But like, we're just thinking this is kind of 101. So tech stack, like just write the shit that touches the customer in the area. So it's like, HubSpot's going to be across the line, but you know, maybe you have, I don't know, product record. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say at every touch point, your prospect is going to touch a different tool because there's different teams. Remember, this is all cross-functional. Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, and then you hand off to customer success, and then there's product. So at the very least, your CRM is going to touch the entire thing. Top of funnel, you may have your ad or email campaign tools with an enrichment solution. No one should ever touch your system without getting enriched. You need a name, phone number, email, and at the very least, a LinkedIn profile, some way to truly identify they are who they say they are. And that would be in between the prospect and the lead stage. Now we're going over from lead to subscriber. This may be a blog. You can set the blog up through the CRM if it supports that, or you might have your blog set up on your CMS with, let's say, WordPress, Webflow, somewhere else. That needs to get integrated to your CRM, so that way you can now track everyone that's subscribing and there's workflows going out reaching those people. Let's say you're doing lead scoring, also happens in the CRM. You're going to need to alert a sales rep when that person becomes qualified. Sales needs tools to reach out to them as well. Make phone calls and dials. That might be SalesLoft and outreach outside of the CRM, so you can at least still see the activities and attribute that this person is being engaged. So every step, I would think about it in terms of who are the people internally that are owning the prospect's engagement at every stage, and what tools do they need to be successful?
That's so well said. And I think also a huge, I guess, benefit of this exercise is you can identify, or it's going to, if it's a sales-led environment, or really in any context, you're going to very quickly become woke to like, oh my God, we have a hardcore silo. And so typically, like if we're thinking about the bow tie silo between teams, right? And usually that's a data silo. That's where, and then it's a technology silo that manifests in a data silo, and then you lose visibility as an operator or as an executive. But if we're moving left to right, it's like awareness, consideration, selection, sales and marketing, onboarding, impact, implementation, promoter, customer success. So you can kind of see how those three team, and that's why organizational structures have evolved a lot. And people are like, actually, the name of this game is customer success, and all those feedback loops that happen, right? Like implementation, hey, sales, you all overpromised what this thing can do, and it's a disaster. Customer success, hey, you all, in implementation, you know, like there's super valuable feedback loops that can happen between each function, and calling that out in the tech stack also. Like, but you could also put a personnel, you could map the personnel to the buyer journey here as well. But we got life cycle stage, tech stack, and then my favorite, or like, where does this actually manifest for a CRO or for a CEO? Ideally, you're staring at a dashboard that shows performance in each of these stages against a KPI. Right. So you want to be super clear on what your KPIs are, and the assumptions there, it's usually a function of volume, the throughput, like the number of whatever prospects, accounts, and then the conversion rates. So it's like, hey, if we want to sell, and I won't go into the math because it's hard to follow off the top, but it's like, hey, if you could back out of it, right? we're trying to hit this much revenue. Our average contract value is whatever. We need to win this many new customers that need to stay. Okay. And then you back out all the way through your conversion rates. We need to make sure that at the top, at the left side of our bow tie, the top of our funnel, we need whatever volume of leads, because a percentage of them are going to make it to the next stage. A smaller percentage of that's going to make it a smaller percentage, and that's going to get you to your 50 customers or whatever to hit your revenue target. And so the KPIs is where this stuff really comes together, if you ask me.
100%, 100%. I was going to try to pull up on an example of how we structured this at Central Metric for our clients. But to your point, you can customize this with all of the important factors that go into structuring your buyer journey. So like we talked about, you can add a row for people. I always recommend adding a row for people, because every action, if it doesn't have an owner, who are you going to check in with to make sure that it got done? There needs to be some level of accountability to make sure those KPIs are accurate. That's why I would say here, include a row for, is it marketing director, marketing coordinator? I would include a row here for ownership.
Yeah, 100. Optimize for accountability always, right?
Always.
And that's very, very clear. And probably somebody needs to own the buyer journey cohesively, whether that's a CRO, CMO, CEO, whatever. Because product's going to be in here too, right? I mean, they sometimes product gets a little bit shortchanged because sales are typically the closest proximity to the market. So they're your best feedback loop because they're talking to prospects all day, every day. And then you work your way right, but product needs to definitely be inserted here as well, because they're going to get extraordinary insights from sales, customer success, implementation, et cetera. So mapping personnel for sure. And again, we're fixated on PLG for now, so we kind of skipped it. But so that's where we landed. My goodness.
I would say if I could add to this, I would say in terms of the people who will need to be involved in this conversation, holistically, would be the executive team, obviously, because they need executive buy-in, but the people who are owning it are product and marketing. They start all the way from the beginning and they go all the way through the end. Why? Because we want to know, how can marketing better market what we are offering to people and present enough content to drive them along faster and hit those conversion rates we're looking for. And on the product side, you have to keep that feedback loop going, so they always are understanding how to optimize that product roadmap and prioritize the important aspects.
So well said. David Sachs has an awesome thing on like an optimal SaaS operating model. And he's obviously an absolute savage in the domain. He runs Craft, which is a fund for mostly PLG SaaS firms. He goes after kind of venture growth plays. He has this kind of concept of snapping together functions. So it's like products developing, hey, we're ready to release XYZ. They then snap together with marketing, and they create a promotional campaign to build buzz around the release and get everybody jazzed about it. Then marketing has to snap together with finance, because finance is going to give them a budget to promote the release.
I was going to say, we're forgetting finance, because finance touches all of this.
Yeah, totally. The CFO scratching his head like, whatever, grow it, don't spend any money. So you can think too about launch, or like filtering product launch cycles through this framework as well. So it's like, cool. Exactly. And then this becomes more about a release schedule and how you snap together marketing campaigns that foot to the product roadmap.
To add to that, I would say you can also, to the end of that point, once you start snapping functions together, you're essentially making a copy of this model on screen and just saying, okay, awareness, consideration, selection. Okay, finance. What is finance doing in every stage? Marketing. What are you doing in every? That's another way to visualize what needs to happen. So don't hesitate to go as deep as you need to make it make sense for your organization.
Totally. And rinse and repeat and iterate. I think there's a common, I guess I'll say, pitfall where it's like, hey, you just set it and forget it. And that is a big no-no, right? Like in any environment, if you're not iterating, you're not learning, and you got bigger problems. So I would treat this as a dynamic thing that evolves. And if it's not documented, it doesn't exist. And when it is documented, you should expect much more constructive, rich conversations, because you're literally pointing at shit. And it's like, this is breaking down this thing right here. You own this. What are our ideas? This handoff over here is janky. Who owns this? How do we do this? I own the whole thing. It's my accountability to resolve this stuff. These are the KPIs for our next, quarterly OKRs or whatever. But the thing is, I mean, the holy grail again is to, like, Dalio to the bone, is a total visualization of the machine. and then real-time
Yeah.
performance metrics that foot to the visualization so that you have the most true savage dashboard for the business. And if you don't have
Yep.
something that's visually represented, it's in everybody's ears. You can't build alignment around that. You can't constructively debate what's going on.
Nope.
You can't identify issues you have, which gives you no leverage as an operator. It's like, hey, what's happening? You're like, I don't know. It's like, what should we fix? I don't know. Let's drive more leads. And it's like,
Oh,
we got
and
a
fun
lot of
fact.
leads. Yeah, we got enough
Yeah.
leads. We need to convert the leads.
And fun fact, you don't have to do that Pony and Dan show for the board of advisors anymore or your board of directors. Just share the dashboard link so they can see your performance. Now you're just
In real
telling a
time.
story on the call.
Yeah, it's just a voiceover, 100%. So,
That's it.
wow, I knew this would be a club banger. You did not disappoint, Kjael. And let's just say too, Kev goes about, like, if this was the like Inception, Kevin goes about 5 dreams into these. So if anybody wants to talk shop on this stuff, he's your guy. For me, I'll stick with the, the 5 color crayon version, because that's all I need to see. And I just need to make sure that the dashboard with the actual KPIs is airtight. But extraordinary conversation, my dude. Thank you.
Yeah, same. Drop a comment if you want the template. We can get really deep. But this was amazing. Love to have this conversation. And the goal is, let's educate everyone from what's a funnel to what's a true buyer journey.
No doubt. No doubt. All right, my man. I'll catch you next week. Cheers for the love of the
Giddy up.
game. God.